If a country's climate plan is designed mostly by the same kind of people sitting around one conference table, can it really understand how floods, droughts, the energy transition, and climate finance affect everyone? That is the question for this video. In climate plans, are all of us being considered? The answer is, not always. GESI stands for Gender Equality and Social Inclusion. It asks climate policy to recognize that people face different risks and have different access to voice, resources, knowledge, and opportunities. This is not about giving women or any other group special protection. The real issue is that climate change never affects an abstract average person. It affects real people of different genders and ages, in different occupations and communities, with different incomes, abilities, and positions of power. Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs, are the climate plans each country submits under the Paris Agreement. They are more than emissions pledges. NDCs shape how a country adapts to risk, allocates climate finance, builds green industries, and measures whether policy is working. In 2026, UNDP published this report, looking back at climate planning from 2019 to 2024 in 134 countries supported by the Climate Promise. It reviewed 275 planning and policy tools to ask one central question: had gender equality and social inclusion actually been built into the design and implementation of climate plans? Among the 134 countries, 84 systematically integrated gender equality or women's empowerment into NDC instruments. 57 included youth participation. 24 addressed the rights and meaningful participation of indigenous peoples. 22 considered disability inclusion. 13 mentioned older people. Progress is real, but it is uneven. The report identifies 8 entry points for inclusive climate policy: coordination mechanisms, capacity building, stakeholder engagement, gender and socioeconomic analysis, planning tools, climate finance, transparency systems, and policy alignment. Coordination is the strongest area. 82 countries have brought gender or inclusion-related institutions into NDC coordination structures. But the numbers drop as we move toward budgets, laws, and accountability. Only 34 countries had inclusive climate finance strategies. 18 used gender-responsive budgeting. And only 4 had written these commitments into climate laws or decrees. In other words, many countries have started to bring more people into the room. The harder task is bringing them into budgets, indicators, laws, and power structures. Why does this matter? Because when policy ignores differences, policy itself can create new inequality. Adaptation is meant to reduce risk, build resilience, and improve lives. Yet adaptation measures that overlook gender equality can increase women's workloads and reduce their decision-making power. When water, energy, or transport services become unreliable, who spends more time finding water, caring for family members, and keeping communities running? The same principle applies to indigenous peoples, young people, persons with disabilities, older people, and low-income communities. If policy ignores their circumstances, both risks and opportunities will be distributed less fairly. Laos provides a clear example. Its community engagement guidelines describe 5 levels of participation: inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower. At the shallowest level, government tells a community what is happening. At the deepest level, final decision-making power rests with the community. That is the real dividing line in inclusion, not whether a meeting happened, but who can influence the outcome. Chile offers an institutional example. It established a Gender and Climate Change Roundtable, jointly designed by the Environment Ministry and the ministry responsible for women and gender equality. Relevant institutions were then formally included in the technical team revising the NDC. that meant gender was not added after the technical work. It became part of the technical discussion itself. Inclusion must also reach finance. The report notes that global climate finance was about $803 billion per year in 2024. By 2030, meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement will require around $5.2 trillion a year. Even more striking, less than 2% of global climate finance reaches smallholders, indigenous peoples, and local communities in the global south. That is why gender-responsive and socially inclusive policy cannot stop at slogans. The question is not who receives sympathy. It is whether finance, projects, and capacity building reach the people who understand local risks best and often need resources most. The same is true of data. Transparency systems must ask, who benefited? Who did not? Which groups carried the costs? Which groups gained new opportunities? 48 climate promise-supported countries have already integrated GESI into transparency frameworks, indicators, or data systems. Without data, there is no visibility. Without visibility, there is no accountability. So, back to the opening question, in climate plans, are all of us being considered? Not yet. Not completely. A climate plan cannot succeed on emissions numbers alone. It must also understand who bears the risks, who holds local knowledge, who can access finance, who joins decisions, who appears in the data, and who can enter the green economy of the future. GESI is not about giving extra protection to one group. It helps climate policy see real differences, and recognize the knowledge, capabilities, and agency of diverse people. A truly inclusive climate plan does not ask who deserves sympathy. It asks who bears risk, who participates in decisions, who receives resources, and who is counted as part of the solution. When all of these people are considered, climate policy is more likely to be fair, effective, and deliver real results.